Da-da. So I'm just gonna. So I went live. I'm just gonna double check that I am live.
There's a small possibility Debbie's going to walk past me with the dogs at some point during this,
No.
but it'll be
Hey,
fine.
That's all good.
That's real life.
It's an Easter egg.
Whoa. Okay, that was cool. I just had a neat deja vu moment. I just heard Max say that twice. Okay, we're set. I'm going to do. Oh, that's me. My bad. All right, Alex. Whenever you're ready, you're good to go.
Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and start this off. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today we're doing something a little bit different. Not the usual video that goes up on the channel, because today I'm talking about a game that I don't know anything about, which should be entertaining. We're going to be talking about Stonesaga. Stonesaga is going to be a new game coming to... We're going to start again. I always do this wrong. How do you pronounce the name of your company? Just straight up Okay, cool.
Games.
Good, cool. Because I'm always thrown off whether there's a way to say it. Or Okay, great. From Games. Perfect. Okay, starting again. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today we have a little bit of a different video, because today I'm talking about a game that I know nothing about, or nothing is not the correct exact word. Rather, I'm talking about Stonesaga, which is going to be next big Kickstarter. This is the same company that brought you... I'm going to start again. Same company that brought you Mythwind and Stars of Arcarios, right?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, let's do that last time. Hopefully, we'll see.
All good. All good.
No worries.
Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today... Nope. Let me start again. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today I have a bit of a different video than normal, because today I'm talking about a game that I know very little about, practically nothing. Specifically talking about Stonesaga, which is going to be next game. The same company that brought you Stars of Arcarios and Mythwind. They have another large game coming to Kickstarter, and it's one that I don't know enough about, but the good news is we have Brendan, Max, and Luke from to help me talk about the game today. And specifically, I'll tell you the one thing I do know, which is Stonesaga is a cooperative survival crafting board game set in a unique, persistent world shaped by your choices, which is definitely interesting enough to start the conversation. So, Luke, Max, you guys are the designers of this game. Do you want to talk about it a bit?
Absolutely. So, Stonesaga started with a concept Brendan brought to me quite some time ago now. And the concept was brilliant. It didn't quite have a game attached yet, but it was a game that involved drawing on the inside of the box lid and creating this cave painting on the inside of the box lid. And we just started riffing on that from there, where to go with that concept. What sort of game does that belong in? And we started building out this game and, we went through a ton of ideas. I mean, one of our early concepts was a sort of a roll and write where you draw your own map, and we did some experimentation with that, and we discovered that neither of us could draw maps we liked. We went through a bunch of incarnations, but we ended up with Stonesaga, which is it's a cooperative survival crafting game. It's based around the concepts of exploration, discovery, collaboration, and persistence. This idea of, this world that keeps on changing. You keep adding things to the inside of the box lid. And, there are these sort of like changes on the world that are maintained.
Okay.
Now, it sounds exactly like a legacy game on the face of it.
Which is going to be my next question, yeah.
And there are definitely, there's a lot of legacy game in the DNA. But there are a couple things. Other than drawing on the inside of the box lid, and you could always throw a fresh piece of paper in there and start again, nothing's going to be destroyed. So you'll be able to give this game away after you play it. Again, you might need to replace certain simple components. There's a journal, but that can be done with scratch paper, or you can print one out. There's the box lid. You could do that on a appropriately sized piece of paper. But the idea is we didn't want to create something that's just, played once and thrown away. There are a lot of great legacy games out there, maybe too many great legacy games out there. And we wanted to create something that had that board game appeal of like, you play this, and then maybe you enjoy it again, or maybe you give it away to a friend for them to enjoy it.
Yeah. And, just jumping in here, Alex, like I'll show, before we get any further, I'll show the box art, kind of big screen here, and the kind of big idea, right? When Max and I were speaking, is this like prehistoric kind of Stone Age Mesolithic time period where you would open up the box and it would like the cave wall would be there and it would be like this blank canvas. I just had this like dream and picture, right, at the end of each game that you would actually get a chance to like sketch out your actions. Maybe you fought a monster and your whole tribe died, and so they would all be kind of laying dead on the cave wall. But then, after 10, 20, 30 games, you open this cave wall and you actually see like a history of peoples or multiple people groups, through various different play sessions. And then, you sitting there with Max and like, hey, yeah, look at that. Remember that time we found that river that led us to that certain place, blah, 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 right? And he had all those visual cues, and it's so cool, right? That how it has evolved into this really neat kind of cooperative crafting game that Max and Alex have really kind of pioneered and made something really cool.
So I have so many questions, a ridiculous amount of questions. First of all, you kind of answered the I was going to ask why cave painting. You kind of touched upon that a bit. You had your vision, so to speak, but I mean, so many questions. Where to begin? So first of all, do I have to draw this thing, like me, the player? Does it rely on like some degree of actual artistic ability?
So one of the key things about that. Oh, you can go ahead, Blake.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's cave painting. So if
it's
you can
cave
draw
painting.
a stick figure, that's good. You're there. You're there already.
One of the key things about the artistic elements of the game, and there are some, is that they're not required to make the game. The art being good isn't required to make the game fun. The things you add, embellish onto the cave wall are sort of these like little touchstones for your group, but they don't have to look like great masterpieces, because mine certainly don't.
Yeah, they're not gameplay essential. They're like kind of flares to add on to the theme of the world that you're building. That's all.
Is it gameplay at all? Is there any mechanical tie-in, or it's kind of like the culmination, the award of your session?
I think that's a good way of putting it. It hooks in with the things you've done in the session. So certain things might cue you to draw a particular thing. Oh, depict this event. And since you play a campaign, a number of linked games across a number of epochs, which are sort of these big chunks of time where you have these time jumps from one to the next. Like you're adding more and more things, and those those past events that you've recorded become the history of your group. And there are various mechanical hooks where those things that get recorded into history can come back. But strictly speaking, the drawing on the wall doesn't have a hard mechanical component. It's more of a soft mechanical component.
Now, you touched upon the Ward legacy while simultaneously seeming like you're shying away from it. Is this legacy? Is it campaign? Either, both, neither?
So there is a campaign to play. The campaign has a lot of free-form progression. You can pursue different goals that you're presented with. You can unlock alternate goals. But the campaign is a linked set of games you can play. And that takes you through, each game is a relatively standalone experience representing a sort of moment of crisis for a particular generation. And then if you choose to continue that campaign, the next game will follow on with the next generation, or perhaps some of the same characters. If a character is old or young in one game, they can be old in the next. If a character is old in one game, they're not continuing to the next game. So there's this sort of continuity between games to unlock additional content. But the persistent world does allow you, if you want to, you can play a game. If you don't really like the outcome where that's taking your group, or you got wiped out, you might start over. So there's a little bit of a roguelike aspect to it, where you can play it as sort of a standalone experience. You can pull in different sets of friends. They don't necessarily need to have been in for every previous game, though obviously having been present for previous games will, help their connection and interest in past events.
So a little Gloomhaven-esque in that sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and kind of the bit that Max touched on, the idea of like generational storytelling, And so, each kind of game session is a generation of, and you're playing a member in a community, right? And so it makes sense that there's not just 4 or 5 people hanging out in the community. There's multiples, and so they drop in, and maybe your person dies, unfortunately, in a session. That's okay. There's another one, or they get older, as Max said, and live on in legacies in different ways.
Cool. So I'm still trying to fine tune that exact aspect. Is it a game that can be played forever in like an ever evolving, the story's going on, or it's resettable in that you start the campaign again because you haven't destroyed things? Like, is it like a good example would be, are you familiar with Oath?
I'm familiar with Oath. I haven't played it. I know Luke has, though. Luke, what would you say about that?
Owned it, haven't played it.
I know the
Okay.
feeling. I know the
Classic.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that what we're striving for is more of a resetability in the game. And I think the biggest part, with that campaign that Max touched on, with sort of the elected goals almost, is there's a lot of variability in what you choose to do.
Okay.
So you may decide, let's move ahead, let's get to the next like major story beat in the campaign, or you may linger longer and sort of spread out the number of plays that it takes to get through a campaign. So there's sort of a variability of longevity there, even just within one campaign play. But I think ideally what you do is like you can finish a campaign and then restart and make different choices the second time around. And that's even touching a little bit on like what Max mentioned, the roguelike aspect. We're sort of lifting a lot of ideas from that video game genre, mainly the idea of, and this also dovetails with what we're sort of taking from legacy games, is that idea of discoverability, where maybe it takes 3, 4, 5 games, or even 2 totally different campaigns, 2 totally different playthroughs of the campaign to discover certain elements of the game. So that's sort of the biggest thing that we're taking or lifting from the legacy genre and putting into more of a traditional board game, is that sense of like the game isn't just laid out before you with here's everything in the game, you can choose what you want to do. It's more that as you play, certain things unlock, or you get hints on how to do other mechanics you had no idea existed, and that sort of progressive, sort of evolving mechanical gameplay is sort of a big part of what we mean when we're saying like it's borrowing elements from the legacy game genre.
Gotcha. So we spent a decent amount of time on what style and genre of game it is, and that's what you're saying. There's a good segue into mechanics. When you say discover, like, what does the game play like? What are you discovering? What are you doing in the game?
Yeah, so at the start of the game, you're a group of people who's just moved into this glacial valley that has become available because the snows are thawing. As you move in, you have a set of trays, and this is where the persistent gameplay comes in. So you have a set of trays, and then you have hex tiles that fit into the trays. And these trays allow you to preserve the state of your board between games. So if you want to continue exploring the same valley, whether you're playing a continuous civilization or starting new civilizations, like as you move into new spaces, you place down new hexes. So it's a procedural board determined by sort of weighted chance. And then the hexes have features that slot into those little punch board tokens of various locations you can find. And so that's your sort of like exploration and discovery at the surface level. But the idea of discovery goes a lot deeper into the campaign, into the game in general, and is really something we're pushing on. So for instance, with the crafting system, we don't give you a bunch of recipes for things you can craft. The crafting system works by you trying different item combinations and seeing what comes out of a sort of a simple cipher system where you have these icons that you can match up. And then, if you have combined the items in a sensible way, you put the stick along with the sharpened stone and faced it the right way, the code will kick out a spear and tell you to go get the spear out of the game box.
Interesting.
So
a little Minecraft-esque.
Yes, a little bit, yeah. So the discovery plays out in that way, and then what gives the game some structure. So it's not just Minecraft. but it definitely draws from the sort of like survival crafting video game genre in this way. Especially the game Raft, actually, if you've played any of that one, is that each game you're given a crisis card, and that card is sort of this like pivotal moment facing your society right now. And those crises linked together, doing various things will open up new crises that can pop up for you, or you follow a progression chain. You'll play some number of crises in each epoch, and then you'll hit the end of an epoch. There's a climactic event, and then you can progress to the next epoch. And you have some flexibility to play more games in an epoch or sort of blitz through it more quickly to get to the more, like core story options.
Well, Max, you got to speak about the monsters.
Yes. So the other thing you're doing, and what's keeping things interesting, and this is also something that I thought of before I played Raft, but was definitely inspired by the fact that one of the brilliant things Raft does is from minute one, there's a shark trying to eat you. And it's a really good twist on the Minecraft genre because it means that you immediately have a pressure from the game and you have a relationship with another character. So what's filling that role here is the other idea that Brendan came in with, which is like big monsters. So there are these big, weird monsters that are moving into the valley at the same time you are, or maybe they're coming down as the snows thaw or what have you, but they're also entering this area, and all of a sudden they are there as well, and you have to figure out what your relationship with them is like. And in some ways these creatures are actually the most consistent characters of the game, because your player characters will shift game to game because of the generational shifts, because of people dying, disease and what have you. But the monsters are immortal, so they'll be around for the entire playthrough. And they're sort of a mix of like having a sort of like design and personality with this beautiful art by Andrea, but then also having certain procedural elements. So their designs are fixed, but their behaviors are actually not. And so you might end up with one type of monster being a predator, while another person might end up with it being more of like a territorial creature, which will behave differently and interact with your society differently. And that's one of the places you can sort of make that ongoing progress, is you can learn more about the elements of this monster. But the resetability, because that's procedural, is if you play it again, that monster might have different traits. You might go from your relationship with it being, okay, we know it guards this area, so we just keep it over there and keep it happy, to like, oh, it keeps trying to eat us.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so that's a little. I'm still like trying to just build this world around me. Like we talked about like the four aspects of the game: the cooperative survival, the generational storytelling, the crafting and building, the exploration and discovery. We're spending a little time on the crafting and building, spent a little time on the generational storytelling. The cooperative survival starts feeding into the monsters, going into the exploration and discovery, and also replayability to that degree. If some aspects of the game do involve that discovery, that finding out how you combine these elements to produce something, how does that affect replayability, if you know the code, so to speak?
So that's an interesting thing. Yeah. So if you know the codes, you'll definitely be able to go faster. But I think actually your Minecraft example was a good one there, which is like once you've mastered that system, you still continue to enjoy the game, and you start to say like, well, what else could I have done? And so one of the things that we really want to have in this game, and this is where Luke has been doing a lot of really amazing work with this sort of bare bones crafting system I handed him, is been in having lots of interesting variants. And when I sort of concepted the crafting system, I had a spear, but in that time Luke has evolved. You want to talk about all the things the spear has evolved into?
So many spears. What was it? I at one point I worked out how many different items you could just make out of bones, and I was just messaging you, so many bones.
That's incredible. Can we? I don't know if is it a spoiler to share maybe in vague terms a little bit of what you guys shared with me last week with the with the moon. You don't have to say specifically with what.
We can spoil stuff. Yeah, you want to talk about Moonblood, Luke?
Sure.
Yeah, do it.
I think we can. I can give a vague description here. So there's definitely going to be elements of the game where, like, you find a thing and you're not quite sure what to do with it. You're exploring a glacier. You find this like weird goo, but like some of it is like rock hard, and like how does that work? Can I make something out of this? And so the game will have so you'll literally have a material token, similar to how you would have a token for wood or stone, and like you've figured out already how to like make those into craftable materials. You carve the wood, harden it over a fire, shape the stone with another type of stone. But like how do I change this metal sort of mercurial liquid into like a hard like onyx form and maybe make something out of that? And so like there's sort of like, I guess if you will, end game content a little bit, where it's like, yeah, you can figure out all these mundane tools. Yeah, you can figure out how to make a regular wooden spear, you can make a bone spear, you can make a stone spear, which all progressively get better and have different subtle differences too. But if I'm going to make a spear out of this sort of alien substance that's super hard, how do I go about doing that, right? So there's more to figure out as sort of the game unlocks more stuff. You might know how to make a normal spear, but once you figured out the mundane stuff, the game is going to add more sort of weird, sort of mystical type stuff that you're going to have to sort of like look to other game components for hints and clues and icons to sort of figure out how to work with those materials. So yeah, we're definitely sort of like putting some puzzles in the game, so to speak, and sort of solutions that lead to other puzzles or other things you can unlock. So, and again, that's a little bit sort of like the roguelike aspect, where it's like, some of this is a little bit random. You need to have this sort of encounter. You need to draw this exploration card while you're in a glacier, something like that. So there's a little bit of randomness on top of sort of the puzzle. So, hopefully there's like layers of content that, as players sort of master some systems, they sort of figure out how to solve other systems too.
There's also go ahead.
Oh, we spend a lot of. You do.
There's also some content you almost certainly won't see during any given playthrough. There's more to do in any epoch than you can do in a single playthrough. You might not find it all, but there's even in the current working sketch of the sort of like conspiracy board I've made. It would take at least 2 or 3 playthroughs, and I as the content matures and gets fleshed out, that'll be even. I'm sure that will get even more complicated.
Cool. So you had a lot of talk about different types of spears. I assume that means there's some form of combat in this game.
There is. It's fairly simple, actually. This is one thing where we thought a lot about this. Do we want sort of like a combat mini game? Obviously, dealing with these monsters is going to be this involved process. And I tried to draw from really interesting games with interesting combat, but not to get too deep into the nitty gritty of that combat. So one of the big things about combat is that when you're dealing with one of these like immortal monsters, more important than sort of like having a tactics strategy to deal with it is discovering things about it. So like we really pushed on the emphasis on learning about it, so you can learn the monster's vulnerabilities to find alternate ways to fight it. In terms of the actual combat complexity, it's pretty straightforward for I would say a lot of board games. So you're going to roll some dice and make some choices. But it's not, there's no tactical grid or anything, just to be clear.
Yeah, well, and I think, actually, maybe it's good to point out, I think combat is actually sort of de-emphasized, and I haven't even thought of it as combat. It's more of defending yourself or hunting. And it's actually a pretty light mechanic in the game. There's, for example, the spear. You may actually make the spear because it gives you a benefit to fishing. I think, maybe something
I've
you
always
can talk
wanted
about,
a
Max.
blood moon spear for fishing.
I mean, hey, it is better at fishing. It catches a lot of fish, man. I would actually say we put way more work into the foraging mechanic than the combat mechanic. I don't know if you want to give a preview of that, Max.
Well, foraging can become combat if you do it wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
That's
so
the conversation.
Yeah. So one of the key things is that the game has a number of part of this discovery process. We wanted to have a number of integrated mini games that sort of give you different activities you do on your turn, and that creates a sort of sense of variance. But it also gives us a lot of opportunities to hide interesting little tidbits in the game in various places. So, for instance, one of the earliest ones to come together. Was the mining mini game where you reach into a bag and feel for the texture of plastic chips to find the type of stone you want.
Okay.
And some of the chips have little scorpions on them or something that is a dangerous creature that you don't want to pull out. So you've got this sort of like, you're engaging your senses in various ways. So for foraging, I'd actually been doing a bunch of just sort of hobby foraging around here when I was thinking about that system. So it's a trick-taking game where you sort of build this panorama of the environment you're going through. And the danger aspect comes from the fact that you are foraging, but there are various predators in the environment that want to eat you. So it's a push your luck game. You're sort of trying to put out more cards while you build up a board that has the resources you want, but not too many of the predators that you're unable to escape at the end. So it's sort of, there's that push your luck aspect to it. And then it's also, because those cards have a lot of art, there's a lot of ways to embed little secrets in those. So that's something we've been talking a lot about as well, is the, like, what are the little interesting incidental things we can slip into there?
Little tips on how to use that moonstone blood, the moon blood.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, very likely. Yeah.
Interesting. What are some other mini games you have? So you mentioned kind of how combat's almost a mini game. We have foraging as a mini game. You have the bag. Anything else?
Yeah, just before Max jumps in, because I think a helpful analogy for people who are like
Sure.
survival game experts, you could call chopping a tree down in any of those games like a mini game in essence,
Yeah.
right? And so while our mini games are like maybe more, I don't know, more kind of fleshed out, they're in a sense that they're kind of like activities. So even though the mechanics that wrap around them are like mini game esque, they are like activities in those games, where there's fishing, in like Stardew Valley, right? You go out and you do fishing, very, very similar to that. Speaking of fishing, Max,
Yeah,
what a segue.
There's fishing. Yeah. So fishing is a dice game. You're trying to sort of like line up your stab on the fish. You can try to get greedy and get more fish. So it's also kind of in the push your luck genre, but instead of cards, it's dice. So it's a different probability calculus, which is far less trustworthy, because with cards, you can be like, okay, I know what's left in the deck, but with dice, it's like, well, anything could happen. And the variance between those two is nice. There's also the horrible bag.
I was going to say inventory management is
inventory management. Yeah. So originally we had like a gridded inventory, Minecraft style.
Okay.
But then Luke and I had a conversation, and we came to the conclusion that cave people don't have grids. They wouldn't have that thinking about that way of organizing things is very modern, right? But like, honestly, you're going to be stuffing it all in a sack. So why not put a sack on the character card where we were going to put the grid, and then you have to fit all your stuff in there within the drawn confines of that bag. So you have to fit all your
no overlapping, I assume.
Yeah, no overlapping. Exactly.
And that led to making the tokens just various different sizes.
Yes. So the tokens are now going to be various different sizes and goofy shapes, and it's actually going to serve a mechanical purpose for once.
Cool.
But yeah, and that actually led to another thing too, which is that we wanted a lot of these activities to potentially be almost overlappable. So like, if Luke says, "Oh, I want to go forage," I can kind of start my turn, because everyone takes one action for each of their turns. So it's like, whatever happens to Luke foraging, I'm not going to need to make a different choice really based on that. So I can start. Now, I would say, oh, I'm going to go fishing. So I grab the little reference card for fishing. I grab the dice. I can roll fishing, and then Brendan can say, okay, great. I'm going to, maybe he doesn't want to start, but he can be fiddling with his inventory to make sure everything fits, so that at the end of the round, when he has to do the check to see if everything fits, he, because you can actually just throw stuff into your bag and overlap it. But at the end of every round, there's a reckoning, and anything that doesn't fit, you have to throw away. So, he can be fiddling with the spacing and making sure everything fits in there. And we really wanted to just make sure that, players can be engaged at all times. Cooperative games, like that, I think the best ones tend to do things to keep people engaged, whether it's through like some sort of cinematic thing or having players read each other's cards or what have you. But, thinking about those mechanisms of keeping everyone at the table interested.
Gotcha. So what's the, going a bit of a tangent, something new topic? How do you win and or lose? So do you lose a campaign, individual scenario? Do you fail forward? Do you have to repeat? How do you win? Like how does that all work?
So generally, most of the crises you'll face, and each crisis is a game, have a sort of like a set of outcomes. So at the end of the crisis, you flip the card over and then you see what happened. And one thing says like, for the first crisis, like, oh, did you find a source of food, find a source of water, and establish a village? Great. This happens. Did you find a source of food, find a source of water, but your village got eaten by a monster? Okay, then this other thing happens. Did you not do either of those things? Okay, then this other thing happens. And so there's a sort of like, there's a degree of fail forward if like you made a village, but it got eaten by a monster. But there's also cases where you might end up sort of like, okay, you have to flee the valley and start over. And so you have sort of a soft restart where you don't reset the board. Like the things you've discovered are already there. You can go back to the same thing, but you like aren't able to get established. So you leave and then come back the next, some generation later or something.
It's as if there's a new kind of peoples kind of coming into the valley after you've been wiped off.
The wreckage you left.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Well, exactly. If you established a village and it gets eaten by a monster, it turns into a ruin.
Okay. And how do you maintain balance around those multiple variable outcomes?
That is going to come out in the playtesting. We are still in the land of design.
Fair.
And my experience with that is, we can design for that to some degree, but ultimately that is the task that we will be facing when we are hands deep in the playtest.
Cool. Does the game have solo play?
Yes. So it's 1 to 5 players. At present, speaking of the balance, at present, the working model is that you always play with 5 characters, and you simply divvy those characters out between the players. There might be a world where we do a multiple alternate setup with different numbers of characters. But if you want to play it solo, you just play all the characters yourself.
Is that unwieldy or that's functional or playtesting?
So far, it seems pretty functional. Because each action is pretty simple. You just undertake a single task. It's not that different than playing one character. You're just in more places at once. And you keep track of various resources, but you have a character board for each of them. So I'd say it's not more unwieldy than playing your whole Warhammer army. You have lots of
well, if that's the bar.
that's pretty unwieldy.
All right. How about a small Warhammer army?
To gauge the question, I find personally, and I'm trying to think of the exceptions, but I find generally controlling 2 or 3 characters in most games to be very reasonable. Controlling 6 in Zombicide, for example, even though the characters' actions are very light, it's doable, but I find personally I lose a little bit of the identity around the characters when I'm spread amongst that many. And then there's often that middle range, games like Gloomhaven, Wild Descent, whatnot, where you're controlling 4 slightly more in-depth characters. And there I find it's game by game. Sometimes I feel like I'm being split a little too much, and other times I feel it's perfectly manageable. So it is definitely a game by game kind of conversation, but that's like the trigger point for my question.
Yeah, and just to answer that, it is one of those things where we're designing for like what we think right now is our optimal, but
Sure.
we're gonna run it through the ringer, and we're very shortly going to find out whether optimal is what we end up doing, and that will get changed more than likely. So
yeah, we'll see how this survives contact. That is a very good note, and I will put that down as something to keep an eye on, is to definitely try the solo and see how 5 characters feels. So that's good to know.
Cool. So, and this might be a question for Brendan, a little bit of a pivot, but we have a whole lot of words here that are treating similarities. We have co-op, we have a valley, we have residence, we have crafting, permanent changes to the game state, mini games. There's a lot of DNA overlap with Mythwind. Now, we already discussed some of the differences in terms of the winning, the losing, the way the monsters are engaging with you. Those residents seem to be a little less peaceful. But I guess from your sense of things, what are the higher similarities and or differences between this and Mythwind?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I really look for in kind of board games, especially like board games that I'm going to be a part of making. One, I want to make sure that they do something new and innovative, so that's a big deal. And then the other piece is persistence. I think persistence in board games is key. So I don't like using the words legacy or campaign. And I would rather use the word persistent, right? It's a persistent world that we're living in, because I think you can do a lot more with persistence than what people think of like legacy, right? And so even just finding the remnants of another civilization is neat, and that's for me persistence, right? It's like, oh man, someone's been here before, right? So Stonesaga, when that will happen.
Yeah.
And so going from Mythwind, I'm just trying to think. Max and I, we first chatted about a year and a half ago on Stonesaga. So this was about 8 months before Mythwind came out. So I had the idea for Stonesaga, like, well, whatever my idea was, which is way different than what it is now. But I had
like a box, draw in a box somewhere.
No, exactly. Yeah. It was like I wanted to capture a theme. And so that was before, and so it was neat. Like for those of you who don't know Max and Luke, so Max has a history with Star Wars X-Wing, specifically the second edition, and the Lord of the Rings RPG.
Legend of the Five Rings, not Lord of the Rings.
Sorry, my bad. Oh yeah,
no problem.
Legends of the Five Rings, and then Luke has the history. He's game designer on Star Wars Legion. So it's been really neat as far as like the differences, where it's kind of in a way outsourcing game development to like these two industry experts has been fantastic. So I'm kind of leaning into some areas that I do quite well. I hope I do quite well, building a team and kind of seeing that we do kind of have a great vision and beautiful art and just a game that's going to be awesome. And so as far as, back to your question, the similarities, I think at the end of the day, I want a game that I will enjoy playing with my wife. And Mythwind is a game that I will enjoy playing with Jocelyn, and Stonesaga is a game that I'll enjoy playing with her, because we play a lot of cooperative games that are good with 2 players.
So you're designing games for yourself, which is not the craziest thing.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then at the end of the day, I think almost unless you're working at one of the really, I would say Wizards of the Coast, you don't have enough market research to design games for the whole world.
Oh, I mean, that's a bad thing. Me, every time I review a game, I'm sitting here, I'm like, I love it, but if I were making it for me, I would also make this change and this change here. The idea of being able to design a game for yourself is only a bad thing if your tastes are terrible. That's the only problem. But yeah, otherwise it's a great thing.
It's a good point.
Yeah. And that's interesting, because that was another question I was going to ask, because I think, and I know has a whole bunch of games in their catalog. I think that the last 3 of your games are all leaning towards that cooperative aspect, and all are like these bigger games. Not all your games have been cooperative in the past, right?
Yeah, so we're actually just in the middle of a fairly large rebrand. So if you go to oomgames.com, like OOMMgames.com, you will actually only see 3 games on there right now. Okay, cool. You'll see Akarios, Stars of Akarios, Mythwind, and then Stonesaga. So all the ones in my background here. Sure. So we've embraced this as a switch to, we're focusing on narrative driven cooperative games, and whether all our games are cooperative is the question mark, but so far they have been, and they're all strongly emphasizing narrative and persistence and discovery. And so we're leaning into it because seems to have worked for us, and we enjoy making the games. So
very cool. Anything? I'm trying to think of anything else I'm missing in larger strokes of questions. I'm still painting this picture. I mean, I guess that's the goal. The goal is to paint a picture, but I'm still painting this picture of what everything is here. The art, by the way, is absolutely phenomenal. I've been not interrupting you as we go through this, but everything you've been showing doing this as we go is amazing. I mean, that box cover is astounding. Each visual art piece is astounding, which I guess is a good question point. How's the art going to manifest in the game? Is there a lot of cards in the game? Where are we seeing all more of this?
Yeah. So each of the I need to get to a monster slide here. So each of the monsters, they get a nice, beautiful showcase of art. There's a lot of item art. There's a bunch of different types of cards. There's like exploration cards, night cards, event cards. We have all these. Max talked about kind of our hex kind of land system. So that's actually a piece of art that hasn't been designed yet because we're waiting till we 100% nail down the piece because it's going to be it's a really cool. So we've actually already designed the 3D tray. We're getting them printed up right now as like our prototyping piece. It is like a neat system as far as like kind of persistent, procedurally generated piece. It's really cool. So we're gonna have like really gorgeous artwork on there.
I was really impressed when Brendan came to me and said, like, oh yeah, we can do a tray that'll just keep the pieces in the game, in their positions between games. Like, it's so exciting to be able to do that.
I mean, you've worked with game trays, right?
Yeah. So, so Bryce Cook from Game Trays, he's working on this project, not in Game Trays capacity, but he's working with us. So we're getting the best of the biz.
Very cool. Anything else I should be asking? What am I missing here? What are the last points you want to specifically touch upon, or anything cool I should know?
Max, Luke.
Well, I think, regarding the art, one good thing to note there is that this, so the art has definitely been quite influential on the design. And that's something we've been trying to really keep up throughout the process, is like having that be really like a rapport with like between, Luke and myself and Brendan and the artists and graphic designers, and making sure that like, it's not just like a lot of the monster designs, like I came up with mechanics for the art because like, Andrea is a creature designer and he can do something amazing with that. I am not a creature designer, but I can certainly come up with rules for what that thing is going to do. And so, the game is really a lot of people's vision, I think, is one good thing to get across. Yeah. That like, Brendan really had this amazing core concept. And I've been trying to iterate on that from a design standpoint, but we've got some great people iterating on it from a visual standpoint, and those visual elements are important to the design. And Luke and I really want to make sure that like, the cool stuff in the art is in the game. Like if that vine, do you have that picture, Brendan?
Oh yeah.
That's a really good example, because that vine got us thinking about, it's got these kind of AC looking leaves, and that's what started us down the road to like, oh, what if there's this sort of obsidian-y substance you can find that is, so that you can see the like the contrast there, and that got started down that road. And so we've really tried to work the lore, the mechanics, and the art all together as they develop, and it's really interesting doing that for a totally new IP, because this is a blank canvas. This is our cave wall.
There's one more. I just kind of found this. Oh yeah, this is a recent monster design. So
my favorite boy.
Yeah, like what is this creature? Like we've given very little direction to Andrea in the best way, because his monster designs have been so fun. Was it Max? Yeah, Max, you were saying like this creature could be like friendly, or it could be like his mouth, that bulbous
face
thing
opens up and it's a mouth. Yeah, exactly. Right? And that's perfect for the way we've got the setup, because with the procedural traits, it's like, okay, so this is a really cool creature, but like, what does it do? Well, you don't know yet. You're going to find out. And if you reset and play the game again, it might do something different.
I love the idea of this creature being friendly in one game and horrifically eating your head off in another. That so is cool, right? And the campaign will have plushies, I assume.
There's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, now, speaking of the campaign, when is it currently planned for, and where is it currently planned for? Kickstarter, GameFound?
Right now it's Kickstarter Q3.
Cool.
GameFound technically still in beta, although I'm sure we could get on there if we wanted to. But Kickstarter in Q3, that's where we're aiming for.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Okay, so fine. So we have and price point, or are those stuff too early for that?
Yeah, a little bit too
Little too
early.
early
It
here.
will be core box under $100.
Cool. Oh, and then oh, let's just do 2 more questions. Miniatures?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Some miniatures in the box, most likely, because the monsters are so cool, we'll do like bigger miniature add-on for the monsters.
And then the last question is there character art as well? Like, do your characters have their own, form of, I don't know, they come in and out of the game, they're dying, they'll have to all different, but are they represented by some of this amazing art?
There
We
will
haven't.
definitely- Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say we're yes, probably on the character art. We haven't gotten. Well, I haven't gotten any that I like enough to put in the game yet, but we will have some.
I was just, there will be art of what your characters can look like for sure. The way the character cards are used. So the character cards are one component that you do write on, and you just get a bunch of them, and you can print more if you need them, or maybe we'll do an option to do like a character restock pack or something. And it's important that you write on them because when a character ages out or gets eaten by a monster, it gets eaten by a giant furry ball-faced monster or something. They become a legend, and they live on in your, as long as your society is around, that character becomes an asset that other characters can call upon. They're a saga. And so you can use tap into their skills and their stats, much later. And so this gets to one of the sort of like big ideas that Brendan and I started kicking around, which is that, like, in the course of the games you play, game 1 is the events of Beowulf, and game 10 is, by that point, Beowulf is a legend. It's become this thing that's a part of your culture, but it's a very like removed in time. Might even be removed by, because the epoch splits are very big. It might even be removed by thousands of years, but there are these little potential connection points back to the past.
Very cool. Well, Colin makes Stonesaga looks amazing. Sounds very intriguing. I'm looking forward to Q3. If people are interested, where can I send them out? Is it a Facebook page, a mailing list, or just, where can I send them?
Yeah, I'll make sure that you get a link for your description. So when this goes live, you'll see a link probably just below.
Check down that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I've
Otherwise,
been doing a design series on my blog about it.
Yeah,
and that there too.
And we'll have our Board Game Geek listing probably by the time this shows up live. Or you can just go to.
It's currently there. It's currently on Board Game Geek.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah. I'm looking at this now. Stonesaga 2023 designer Max Brook and Luke Eddy. No picture yet. You get the art up.
Yeah, I know. Okay, there it is. So it'll be there, and then Games, games.com. You can find everything there too.
Very cool. I'll throw all those links down below if anyone wants to stay following along for this journey while you wait for Q3. In any case, Max, Luke, Brendan, this has been very fun. Thanks so much for joining me, for going through this Q&A as I try to figure out exactly what it is you're designing and find out more about this. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to everyone else, thanks so much for watching, and have a good one. Cool. Oh, yeah, I found the page when I was looking up, what's it called, Max and Luke, just to pulling up their names, and I was like, oh, they already have the PG page up.
Didn't even know that was on there.
Just got listed. Like,
yeah. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh, all I was gonna say was just because this was something Brendan and I had discussed as well. I've actually already had a number of